This is part 2 of the Bitter Blood re-release. In part 1, Melody and I laid the foundation, the marriages, the money, the pride of 2 powerful families in North Carolina. But tonight, we're going to step into the part of the story that made headlines across the South and shocked a community that thought it knew its own. This is part 2 of the Bitter Blood re-release in memory of Jerry Bledsoe, North Carolina's beloved true crime author. I'm Darlene.
And I'm Melody.
This is Hard Times and True Crimes.
I'm going to recap very quickly. First of all, if you're in our Facebook group, there is a chart there for you to look at as you listen along to this episode because it covers so many different branches of these families.
Yes.
It can be a bit confusing. So you can look there and kind of maybe get some more clarity about who is who in the story. Last week, Darlene told you about Tom Lynch and his parents and his sister in Louisville, Kentucky, and then the deaths of his mom and sister. And then I told you about Tom's wife, Susie Lynch, and her paternal grandmother, Hattie Newsome, and her parents, Bob and Florence Newsome, and their murders in Winston-Salem. If you haven't listened to part 1, you're going to want to do that first because this is so packed with detail. You would be lost if you jump in now.
The story is basically going to cover 3 different families, but they all intertwine.
I'm going to back up and just talk about Susie Newsome and Tom Lynch. You touched on this a little bit last week, and so I don't want to be too redundant, but just a little quick recap about their relationship. They met in college, actually in the library at Wake Forest College, where Tom was enrolled as a pre-med student, and Susie was impressed with his good looks right away. And she had aspirations of marrying a doctor, and he was on the road to becoming a doctor, and so it just seemed like a good fit. Her friends actually said they thought she would always marry a doctor. Tom's friends teased him a little bit because Susie was a couple of years older than him, and what came from we already established a really prominent family, and she was very beautiful, and so they kind of kidded him a little bit, like, how did you get her? She was very pretty, and when I saw the pictures in the Bitter Blood book, she really brought to mind Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Okay.
That was just the vibe. She looks very similar.
Okay. I'll have to go back in and look at her pictures.
And then you covered about how they married. He then decided instead of becoming a doctor, he was going to pursue dental school.
Yes.
So he became a dentist. He opened up his own practice out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Well, and then you talked about Dolores and Susie's relationship and how it was fraught with tension for sure. You brought up how Susie and Dolores were a lot alike, and maybe they recognized each other in themselves, and that might have been part of the problem.
Oh, yeah.
So I did hear from one of our listeners this week. As she listened, she sent me some text. My friend Stacy recognized herself in Dolores. She sent me a text and said, I don't think I should like Dolores as much as I do. And then just right after that, she's like, oh my, am I Dolores? And so we had quite a funny chat about that because Stacy also is into the theater and has self-proclaimed that she's, what was the term you used? Vinegar and piss?
Piss and vinegar.
Piss and vinegar. But I have to say on her behalf, she is a loyal friend.
As was Dolores.
That's right. And Stacy is always there. And so just shout out to her. She does listen to every episode and recognized herself in Dolores a little bit.
That's funny. I can't wait to meet her.
So I'm going to pick up there with their life in New Mexico as a newly married couple. It didn't take Susie long to become homesick once they had moved out to New Mexico. She missed her North Carolina friends and family. She just didn't take to New Mexico very well. She says she felt like it was lacking culture.
Probably she was a little fish in a big pond.
I think that was it. A neighbor pretty much said as much. Her neighbor said that she suspected that Susie just felt a little lost without her well-known family identity to give her a boost there. Mm-hmm. And she really did depend on her family's influence so much. They said she would name drop in Albuquerque. She would talk about her uncle, Fred Klenner, because he was a world-famous doctor. She would slide her aunt's name into conversations. We talked about her aunt, Susie Sharp, and she would tell her friends that her aunt was one of Time Magazine's 12 most important women in America.
Oh.
And so she really wanted to identify with that. But the people in New Mexico, they just weren't that impressed as Susie thought they should be. That you can see why they found her to be kind of like snooty and elitist.
Right. Braggadocious.
Yes, that's a good word. Their neighbors in Albuquerque noticed that Susie was just becoming more and more unhappy as time went on. She started putting Tom down. She would answer him with like sarcasm in front of people, not unlike Dolores did.
That's
Tom's
exactly
father.
what I was thinking.
And you did mention how Susie and Dolores were probably more alike than they were different.
Yes.
And Tom, much like his dad, he quietly took it. You know, he would just kind of ignore it and go on. And then it got to where he wanted to go out and hike and camp, and Susie just didn't want to do those things. That was not her. He finally got tired of trying to get her to come along, and he just started going out and doing those things on his own. With no real friends to speak of, and Tom enjoying his life without Susie, she began to feel very isolated out there. She finally decided she was just going to go back to work.
So it sounds like they're growing apart.
Yes. And, you know, you mentioned they had the two little boys, Jim and John, and so she, of course, needed a sitter for them. They found somebody that lived nearby to watch the boys while Susie worked. The babysitter immediately did notice some parenting frustration in Susie. She said Susie liked to be in control. And, you know, it's hard to keep little boys under control.
Sure. Yes, I know that.
And so things would escalate. She thought Susie's parenting methods could be really harsh. Sometimes Susie would yell. Sometimes she would make the boys stay in their room all day as a punishment. And, you know, they're little boys.
Yes.
Goodness gracious. And then once the babysitter noticed that John had some red marks on his face, and she asked him what happened. And he said he had fallen down. And then Susie replied, he didn't fall down. I slapped him.
Wow.
And then her neighbor said, you must have slapped him hard. And she said, I did. I knocked him across the room.
Oh, my gosh.
Just like that was a normal thing. Isn't that just horrible?
Yeah.
They said that John, he was the older one, and that Susie was harder on him. But she was hard on both of them.
That's sad.
One of Tom and Susie's neighbors, named Irene, she actually was noticing some of those things as well. And she and her husband started having some growing concerns about how they saw Susie treating the boys. And they debated about whether to tell Tom about their concerns, but they had not made the choice to do it yet.
Okay.
There was one occasion when Tom came home from work and he found John was holding his arm kind of funny. And so Tom checked it out and he realized his arm was broken.
Oh, wow.
John explained that he had been doing trampolines on the bed at the babysitter's house, and he said he had fallen on it funny. Tom took him and they got it set at the hospital and they got the cast on it, and Tom thought all was well, not realizing the babysitter never allowed the boys on the beds at her house. And it had not happened there.
Okay.
So when Tom mentioned it to the babysitter, she was furious that Susie had thrown her under the bus.
Yeah.
And said it happened on her watch when it absolutely had not.
Okay.
On other occasions, the babysitter, she started noticing more bumps and bruises on the boys, especially John. But one event that surprised her happened while John was still in the cast from the broken arm. The boys were at her house, and she noticed, Jim's eyes were kind of red. He just kind of looked tired and weak-eyed. And so she was feeling of his head, probably feeling for a fever.
Yeah.
And she noticed when she did that, he kind of winced in pain. And when she looked closer, she noticed this big mushy lump on his head under his hair. And so she called Susie at work, and she's offered to take him to the hospital.
Yeah.
And Susie said, "No, I'll take care of that." And so Susie came and picked the boys up, and she left. But she didn't take him to the hospital. Instead, she dropped him off at her neighbor's house, that same neighbor, Irene.
Okay.
And she didn't tell her about the head injury. And because it was hidden by his hair, Irene didn't see it while she was there. But once again, when Tom got home, he did notice it. And he also noted that one of Jim's eyes was actually turning black. And Susie told him that John had pulled Jim off the bed during his nap at the babysitter's house. Tom took Jim to the hospital, and unbeknownst to him, the doctors were getting suspicious because that just did not look like that type of an injury. They actually thought it looked like an injury from a fist, and they did suspect Susie of child abuse. They questioned Tom about it at first, and he was like, "Oh no, it can't be that." He just didn't believe it. What he didn't know was that the doctors had already reported them to the authorities as suspected child abusers.
Really? I never knew that.
Yeah. Now, nothing ever came from that at that point. soon after that, Susie would actually leave New Mexico.
Okay.
But prior to that, things were kind of becoming worse and worse in their relationship. And then Susie's Paw Newsome, back in Winston, he suffered a series of strokes. Susie decided she was going to go home and visit, and so she would just take the boys for a while and go to Winston-Salem. And after she was there about a week, she called home to tell Tom that she would not be coming back to Albuquerque. And Tom really wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in North Carolina, Susie was telling her family that Tom had asked her to leave because he didn't want to be married any longer, which was not true.
Yeah.
And it was her Aunt Susu, that she was named after, who advised Susie that she should get a lawyer. And so she did. She got a friend of the Sharp family. You know, there are a lot of attorneys in that family anyway. Yeah. So they got a friend of the family named Alexander Sands to represent Susie. And they affectionately called him Sandy. Sandy drew up a separation agreement for Susie, giving her full custody of the boys, with Tom to pay $200 a month child support, along with $100 a month in alimony, plus full expenses for Susie to attend graduate school for 4 years. And in addition to that, there were like many other financial concessions that she asked for regarding their property. Now, she didn't give him the papers immediately. And that's when some people were suspecting that she was really hoping Tom would ask her to come back home and work on the marriage. That she was just throwing that out there as a way to get him back.
Yeah.
To make him think he was losing her.
Right.
Well, Susie's mother was a little more concerned. Florence felt like they're not going to reconcile. And that's not even possible because Susie won't even take any responsibility for the marriage failing.
So her mom kind of saw her for who she was.
Yes.
She didn't make excuses for her.
No, not at all. Florence and Susie actually had even argued about that. They had many arguments.
I mean, I think good for her that she was able to do that.
Susie did make a trip back to Albuquerque to gather some of her belongings. And if she was hoping he would want to work things out, she was clearly disappointed because he did not. In fact, he asked her to be gone by the time he got home from work the next day.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, Susie was furious. But she did pack up and she headed back to North Carolina. And then Tom did follow soon after with a U-Haul, bringing back some of the furniture that Paw had made and given them.
Well, that was good of him.
Yeah, it was. And he stayed with her family for a couple of days and visited the boys. During that time, Susie stayed away from the house. She didn't want anything to do with Tom at that point. And then after he returned to Albuquerque, Susie did sign those separation papers and then sent them to Tom. And he just glanced over them, made a few slight changes and signed them. But he did not get a lawyer to look them over or anything before he did that. Okay. And that would prove to be a mistake for him.
Yeah.
Shortly after that is when Susie found out that Tom had actually moved his dental assistant, Kathy, into the house with him. And they were seeing each other, and she had moved in. He said they had not started seeing each other until after the separation, but of course, Susie did not buy that. And she claimed that he had been seeing her all along, and that was part of the reason they broke up. And that was really just one more axe for Susie to grind in her beef with Tom.
Right. True or not, that was what she believed and was going to have everybody else believe.
Exactly. Suddenly, Susie just got it into her head that she wanted to get this job working in China. And so she was going to move there and learn the language. So she was going to go to school in Taiwan and she was going to take her boys. And everybody questions the wisdom, like, do you really think you should do that?
Yeah.
They're trying to talk her out of it. And she is not going to be deterred. As a matter of fact, the more they questioned her choice in that, the more she was determined to do it. And they were trying to tell her, you're a single mom. You're right now, until you get this divorce settlement, you're on this limited income.
Right.
You are going to be in a foreign country that you are certainly not accustomed to. I mean, she lived a pretty easy life.
Sure.
They were wealthy.
With 2 little boys.
Exactly. But she was determined to do it. And even Tom offered to let the boys stay with him until she came back. He's like, just let them stay with me. I mean, he's their dad.
Yeah.
And she was not having any of that. As a matter of fact, if it was something that was going to make Tom happy, she was going to do the opposite.
Okay.
She was bound and determined the boys were going with her. And she did. She packed her kids up and they moved to Taiwan. They were going to stay for a year. And I think the boys were around 4 and 6 years old at that time. They were fairly young. And I believe when she got there, she very quickly realized that life was much harder there than it was in the States. So much harder than anything she would have been used to either. It was like a rude awakening
Right.
And they were sharing these tiny living quarters with her landlady. There, you've got these customs differences. You've got language barriers. She doesn't have a lot of income at her disposal. She bit off more than she could chew.
Right.
And I don't think she wanted to admit that.
Okay.
She couldn't just decide to head home and tell everybody you were right. She had to save face. So she did something a little strange. She started telling people in her family, she would write letters back home and say that she was being watched, that she felt like somebody was spying on her, that she was being followed, that kind of thing. She was probably paving the way for an early exit.
Right. So that she didn't have to say, this sucks.
Right.
I want to come home.
Exactly.
You were right.
But her family, they have these connections in North Carolina. If you're from North Carolina, you've probably heard of Jesse Helms. I don't know if you have, Darlene, because
No, I
didn't
didn't grow up here. Yeah.
But if you did, and you're close to our age, you'll know that name, Jesse Helms. He's a very well-known senator from North Carolina, conservative Republican senator. He had close ties to her family. And so I guess her Aunt Susie may have contacted him for her to look into those allegations. And nothing.
About her being followed?
Yes.
Okay.
Nothing came from that because the truth was she made that up.
Right.
Before she started making arrangements to come home, her visa was getting ready to run out and she needed that fixed. And they did make a quick call to Jesse Helms and he did get that fixed pretty darn quick.
Okay.
And so within 6 months, she and the boys did come home.
Okay.
Once she got back, her parents were concerned because Susie did not look well. As a matter of fact, she and the boys had gotten sick quite a bit while they were there. I don't know if it was just like the cold, drafty air or what,
Right.
but one of the boys actually got pneumonia. They went to the hospital. Like they just really battled with sickness a lot while they were there. And it could have been the air quality as well.
Yeah.
She came back and her parents were concerned because she was pale, she was tired, just kind of sickly. And so they recommended that Susie go see her uncle, the Dr. Klenner, her uncle. And I mean, after all, when Susie was a young child, he had been the one that delivered her,
Yeah.
diagnosed her heart murmur, and even claimed to cure her from polio with large doses of vitamin C as a child.
Okay.
And so it was logical that she would seek him out again for her treatment. So this time, he diagnosed her with multiple sclerosis, but he assured her family he could take care of her. And so this time she was treated weekly with massive doses of vitamin B intravenously.
Mm-hmm.
It's now the summer of 1980, and friends noticed that Susie, she's been a bit hyperactive, maybe even manic a little bit. She's always full of energy and talking fast and under a lot of stress and just this frenetic activity going on in her life. And she had always been a little bit hyperactive, but now it was kind of like an overdrive.
Yeah.
And she enrolled in graduate school at Wake Forest again. This time she was going to study anthropology. And once again, she and her mother were at odds about that because her mother did not agree with Susie's life choices. And she felt like Susie should choose something more practical because you're a single mother and you need to provide for your children.
Yeah. And she's not wrong.
No. And then, of course, the more she pushed, the more Susie resisted. But with no income other than Tom's child support, Susie didn't have any choice but to move back in with her parents during that time. Mm-hmm. So she did. And that kind of did put a little damper on, just that tension there.
Yeah.
And even though Susie might not have been that happy about the living arrangements, the boys loved it.
Yes, I'm sure.
Especially John, because he craved that male attention, and he was getting that from his pawpaw.
Yes.
Now that the boys are back in the U.S., Tom, he really wants to see his kids. He wants them to come out to New Mexico for a visit. But Susie, she's not having any of it. It had been almost a year since Tom had seen the boys. And still, Susie would not budge. She said, you can come to North Carolina and visit any time, but they're not going out there. Mm-hmm. Then in late August of that year, Tom got a letter from Sandy, Susie's divorce lawyer, asserting that Tom was not living up to his separation agreement. So Tom hired his own lawyer, and the arguing began in earnest. During this time, Susie did seek out some therapy, and her counselor suggested that he should also see the kids. And Susie agreed to that. Her counselor said he felt that Susie was too invested in the boys, too protective of them. And it was during the sessions that the counselor realized also that Susie really was very bitter towards Tom. and how much she despised Tom's family. Like, she could not hide it. She didn't try to hide it, really. Susie would make accusations about Tom, and no, she just didn't have any tolerance for the fact that he was their dad and he had rights too.
Right.
She just didn't see it that way. They were her kids. She was determined to be in control of that. The divorce settlement negotiations were not going well. Once a verbal agreement was made between their lawyers, and at the very last minute, Susie's lawyer failed to honor it. They pulled back out of the deal because Susie was using the boys as leverage. Finally, they did come to an agreement that the boys would go out to see Tom, but, it was going to be costly because there was not a direct flight from Greensboro to Albuquerque at that time. So Tom would have to fly to Greensboro to get the boys, stay for a couple of days to get reacquainted with them, then fly with them back out to New Mexico for 7 days. And then on the return trip, he would have to pay for Susie a flight to Atlanta so she could fly there and meet the boys and fly the rest of the way home with them.
Okay.
And in addition to that, he had to sign a $10,000 bond. And it would, of course, if he didn't return the children, then the bond wouldn't be returned.
That is insane.
I know, he's their dad.
He got railroaded.
He did. And he's never was threatening to take the kids.
He just wanted more visitation,
He
right?
just wanted to see them. He was not trying to get full custody or anything.
Did I read that up until that visit, it had been 2 years?
Yes.
That it had been since he had seen his boys?
Going back and forth with all the negotiating, it took 2 years before he got to see them.
Wow.
Which is why he had to come and stay for 2 days with them and get reacquainted before he could take them back.
That's crazy. And he only got to take them back a couple of days, didn't he?
Like a week.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It is. And of course, he had to foot the bill for all of that. And then Susie's flip-flopping continued. In 1982, she dropped out of Wake Forest, calling her professors idiots.
Of course, she's probably a lot smarter than they
Right.
are.
And then she enrolled at UNCG, taking some business courses. In essence, starting over. She's taken anthropology. She's taken like all kinds of things. She's like,
Yeah.
Florence even remarked to one friend, "It looks like we've got a professional student on our hands." And then the divorce negotiations, they're just not progressing because Susie continues to put obstacle upon obstacle in the path every time they try to move forward. Finally, at the end of 1982, the custody case went to court, and the judge granted Tom visitation in New Mexico for the whole month of July, beginning in the summer of 1983. And then every summer after that, he would get, I think it was like 35 to 37 days during summer break. And then he would get a week at Christmas every other year and a week at spring break on the even-numbered years.
So basically, he hardly got to see the kids at all.
Right. He could visit them in North Carolina anytime he wanted to if he gave a 2-week notice.
How did that happen? He had no criminal background. I just don't understand the logic, except for the fact that her family
has a lot of pull.
Yeah.
And they're judges and they're lawyers and they have friends that are judges and lawyers. Mm-hmm. And they actually did get that hearing moved here to North Carolina. One of, I think Tom's words was that he got hometowned.
Yeah. It sounds like it.
Yeah. And of course, like I said before, all the transportation arrangements fell to Tom. They did say until the summer of 86, at that point, the boys could fly without a parent. But they had to wait until then. Until then, he was going to be paying Susie's travel expenses. You would think Susie would be happy with that.
You would think.
But she wasn't. She was pretty mad about it. She didn't even want him to get that much.
That is crazy. What does she want? Him just not to be able to see the boys at all?
Yeah, pretty much. She did not want to give that visitation. Florence and Susie are still arguing pretty frequently about Susie's parenting, her schooling choices, pretty much every decision Susie makes. Mm-hmm. They disagree. They kind of butt heads about it. And then Susie's bitterness toward Tom. And then people started noticing that Susie was speaking of Tom and his family in very sinister tones. Florence even confided to her sister Louise that she feared Susie may have a mental illness. But Susie did have one friend in her corner, and that was her cousin Fritz.
So Fritz was Dr. and Mrs. Klenner's son, their only son. They had him in 1952 when Dr. Klenner was 45 years old. His friends said that they had never seen the doctor happier than the day that his son was born. Instead of handing out cigars, like is typical, he actually passed out packs of Lucky Strike cigarettes from a local company and wrapped them in blue ribbons.
Oh, that's great.
From the time Fritz could walk, he and his dad were the very best of friends, which is, it's a little weird, but, I've seen a lot of overly invested or overly involved mothers, but in this case, it was Fritz's dad, Dr. Klenner, that was more domineering and just overly involved.
Okay, and you're saying it wasn't just your typical father-son relationship.
No.
It was definitely a notch up.
It was a notch up for sure. Dr. Klenner wanted all of his son's attention. He didn't encourage him to make friends with other boys his age. In fact, he kind of discouraged it. In some ways, his child was lonely, especially in not having kids his own age around and to play with. Having two older parents who were they were a little bit reclusive, I guess, and definitely eccentric. The family didn't have many visitors at their house, and that was just fine by Dr. Klenner. And when they did have visitors, they were kind of shocked. He had a nice house, but it was overwhelmingly filled with clutter just all throughout.
That sounds a little bit like, hoarding mental illness.
I definitely believe so. There were stacks and stacks of books all over the place, guns, old clocks, and he just collected kind of strange memorabilia. He had canned foods all over the place and just, I don't know, just lots of different things laying around.
Yeah. And it could just be that he was eccentric. And I'm not saying he was mentally ill, but when you said the clutter, it made me think of hoarding or whatever.
He was definitely eccentric for sure. And he could have been mentally ill. As a little boy without technology, Fritz would spend a lot of time reading his dad's old books and studying the guns in his dad's collection. Now, the doctor did spend a lot of quality time with Fritz as well. He had purchased over 250 acres on the Dan River along the towns of Leakesville, Spray, and Draper. And when he wasn't working, he would often take Fritz out there to a place they called the Mountain. They would bring their guns and they would build fires, and they searched for the elusive Bigfoot that Dr. Klenner was sure lived out there.
I've heard he's in North Carolina.
I have too. He even sent some droppings that they found out there during, their hunts to the Smithsonian to be analyzed.
I love it.
They also blasted the ground with dynamite, him and Fritz did, hoping to find the flow of lava that Dr. Klenner believed was flowing underneath his land.
Oh, wow. Now, do you think Dr. Klenner really believed all those things? Or was he just doing that to give...
Yeah, I wonder the same thing.
To give Fritz, this fun childhood.
We'll be back after a quick break.
All right, y'all. Real quick before we get back to it. Because you keep asking, yes, we finally have podcast merch. We've got hoodies with a new design, cozy, super comfy, and honestly, way nicer than we planned, for just $35. Fair warning though, we only have sizes 2X and 3X left. But let's be honest, that oversized fit is very on trend right now, and perfect for cool mornings or porch sitting. Prefer a more fitted look? We have t-shirts in all sizes for just $20 each. Same vibe, same attitude. Grab yours, rep the show, and help support what we're building. To order, just email us at hardtimesandtruecrimes@gmail.com with what you want, your size, and your shipping address. That's hardtimesandtruecrimes@gmail.com. Now, back to the show.
That's exactly what I put in my notes that I bet those were some fun, memorable times, experiences for a kid.
Yeah.
And when I read it, it was saying it like it was true, but he very well could have been hanging out with his son
and
just doing things to give him an experience.
Right.
While Dr. Klenner clearly loved his son, he was also very stern. He was authoritative. He expected submission and really a lot of perfection. His very presence kind of demanded respect and attention, and there was no arguing with the doctor. He was very opinionated, and whatever he said was the law. Now, one morning, Fritz and his dad were going to go to the mountain. Dr. Klenner had called Fritz to come downstairs so that they could leave. But like all kids do, he was fiddle farting around upstairs and took his time coming down. His dad called him again, and this time when he didn't come, he left without him. And apparently Fritz was traumatized by this.
Oh, goodness.
I honestly don't think that's bad parenting.
Oh, no, I don't either.
That's, teaching your kid a lesson.
Yeah, responsibility.
Yeah, come when you're called, or you might miss something important, right?
Right.
But I guess perception's everything. And Fritz took that as rejection and never forgot it. He did idolize his dad, and it seemed like the driving force in his life was to please him and to make him proud. A childhood friend of Fritz's would remember in elementary school, the teacher was handing back some graded papers. And when Fritz got his paper, he just bursted out in tears. And so the friend was like, oh my gosh, he probably failed his paper. He's going to be in a lot of trouble. But when he saw the paper, it was a B+.
Oh, and
I
he
know.
was upset about that.
He was like terrified of his dad.
Oh my goodness.
Or I don't know that he was terrified, because I don't really think he got spankings or anything like that. I think he was just very concerned about disappointing his dad.
Yeah. And he probably, or maybe he just put that pressure on himself. Do we know, did his dad put it on him, or did he put it on himself?
I kind of get the feeling he put it on himself. I mean, from reading about the relationship, I'm sure his dad was very smart. His mom was very smart. I think he had a lot to live up to. But I don't know that his parents seemed to love and accept him. And trust me, he screwed up through his life. So the other great love in Fritz's life, besides his dad, were guns. Now, let me just go ahead and say that I do not think liking guns makes you a psycho killer.
Right. I don't either.
I mean, my boys, I have one that's in the military now. He likes guns growing up. I don't know. I just grew up with guys like that my whole life.
Yes.
And my dad actually gave my boys a Henry Golden Boy 22.
Oh, wow.
And they were so proud of those.
Yes.
And they're not, weird. I mean, we believe in gun safety and all that stuff, but
absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah. And my boys are the same. They're very much into guns and have some that have been handed down to them. And we do all the gun safety talks. And I mean, it's not weird. I mean, we're in the Bible Belt, but we're also, I guess, in the gun belt.
I guess. People talk like if you love America and if you don't like communism and have a gun, then you're just terrible and gonna, I don't know, bomb the White House.
Those gun-toting Americans.
Yes. Anyway, he did like guns a lot. And when Fritz was in the 7th grade, his father gifted him a German Luger, which was a toggle locked recoil-operated semi-automatic pistol that was used by Germany during both World War I and World War II. And if you remember, Fritz's dad was German, and he did have a little bit of an obsession with Hitler. So there were some he had other issues besides the guns.
Maybe things that fed into the guns.
Yes, exactly. Fritz was really honored, though, that his dad had bought him that gun, and he just fell in love with it and learned everything that there was to know about, every part, and he could assemble and disassemble guns, and he was just very, I don't know, it was a hobby. Some of the other ideals that Dr. Klenner passed down to his son, they were a little concerning. As a teenager, instead of being preoccupied with girls, sports, or even getting good grades, Fritz was obsessed with German history and Hitler. He would draw swastikas on his school notebooks and would You know those weird kids that would like wear army fatigues to school?
Yeah.
He did those kind of things.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, instead of hanging out with friends, he spent his free time hanging out with his dad at the clinic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a little weird as a teenager.
Yeah, and those are some concerning things when you get into the whole Nazi culture, for sure.
It is. It is. He decided that he was going to be a doctor like his dad. And I don't know who decided that. You know, some people say he was pressured into it, but I don't know. I think he really just looked up to his dad, and that's what he wanted to do. In 1969, Fritz was about to enter his senior year of high school in Reidsville. And that was the same year that the schools were going to be integrated. Rather than having his son go to school with black kids, Dr. Klenner sent him to an expensive boarding school in Atlanta.
Oh, wow. So he definitely has those racial views.
He does.
Racist.
And it's interesting because, you know, his doctor's office was actually segregated until the 1980s.
Oh, my goodness.
But he did see black patients and, in fact, took very good care of them. And they say that he was very kind to them. He had black patients that traveled long distances to come and see him. I mean, they believed in his methods and they say that he was good to them. So it's just a really weird, I don't know.
That is weird, especially in this day and time to try to figure that out. So he was a good doctor, bad views.
Yes. Yeah. He had some bad ideology there.
Yeah.
So after he graduated, Fritz enrolled in the University of Mississippi in Oxford, Ole Miss. And they were integrated by that time, but they had sure fought hard to keep those schools segregated. In 1962, when a federal appeals court ordered that the university admit a black student named James Meredith, there was a mob of more than 2,000 white people who were rioting. 2 people were actually killed.
Wow.
And President John F. Kennedy had to call in more than 30,000 troops to come in and stop the riots and actually save that student's life.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was
that's
big deal.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah. So Dr. Klenner appreciated the stand that the school took against desegregation, which is insane to me.
That is insane. We've come a long way.
Yeah, we really have. While Fritz was at Ole Miss, he started to pathologically lie. And I don't know if he had done this earlier, but this is when people were coming out and saying, yeah, I remember him, you know, saying this and that. He would tell fellow students that he was an undercover narcotics cop and that he underwent this special military training in Georgia, but he was actually in Georgia going to that boarding school. He also made up wild tales about being jumped by several black guys and then him single-handedly fighting them off. He was like always the hero in his own story.
And you know those people knew that was all,
yes,
hogwash.
Of course they did.
Yeah.
After 4 years, Fritz, he came home at Christmas and told his parents that he graduated. He'd told his dad that his diploma was going to be mailed to him. Well, Dr. Klenner was super proud, and he put Fritz to work in the clinic. In May, when the diploma still hadn't arrived, he called the school, and he was demanding to know where his son's diploma was. The dean had to explain that Fritz had not finished his classes. He had not graduated.
Fritz got busted.
He did. And when Dr. Klenner confronted Fritz, he told his dad, well, okay, the real problem is that I have enemies in the language department, and they must have somehow removed my credits.
Now, did his dad buy that?
I think he did, or he acted like he did. That's why I don't think his dad would put too much pressure on him, because if he bought that bullcrap story. Yeah. But yeah, he told his dad not to worry, that he was going to go straighten everything out. And he went to the school and came back with a diploma. Only it was a fake because he did not graduate.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I wonder how he made that fake, because I mean, it's easy now, I'm sure, with technology, but he didn't have that. So he went to some lengths to produce that thing.
Yes, he did. At the end of 1976, Fritz told his parents that he'd been accepted to Duke Medical School. His dad was elated.
Okay, how's he going to pull that off?
Well, his dad rented him an apartment in Durham. near the campus where he would stay Monday through Friday while going to school. And then he would come back home Fridays and work in the clinic Friday and Saturday. Fritz was even telling his dad that he was a part of this really important blood research that they were doing at the university. And so his dad would take vials of blood from his patients and send it with Fritz so that he could take back to the school labs to do his research.
Okay. That's crazy. I hope that's the extent of what he's doing in that clinic because he's not in med school.
Nope, he's not.
Please tell me.
That's not the extent of what he's doing.
Oh my gosh.
He's doing lots of stuff in that clinic. Dr. Klenner would brag every chance he got about his boy. But as we know, Fritz was not at Duke, and all of that was just a big lie. During his spare time, because he was living in Durham. He's got plenty of it. When he was in Durham, Fritz would make friends with these guys at the Hillsborough gun shop. He would go in wearing his white lab coat and told them he was a doctor. They thought he looked young for a doctor, but I mean, he was always carrying around his medical bags. And he'd even given his friends nerve pills and offered them injections of vitamins. Yes.
He is committed to this scam.
Oh, he's committed for sure. He told them, all these tall tales about him being a CIA agent, that he'd actually been a Green Beret during Vietnam. He was just such a liar.
Yeah, I am sorry, but I'm not taking nerve pills from somebody who claims to be a Green Beret and in the CIA.
Right, exactly.
Like that.
They were like, how does a doctor have so much time to hang out at the gun shop? But I mean, they were young, and I guess they just, I don't know, they probably just weren't used to people making up stories like that.
Yeah.
When Susie Newsome went to her uncle, Dr. Klenner's office in 1980, it was like you had mentioned earlier, because her mother had encouraged her to go. Susie just hadn't been acting like herself since she'd returned from China. And she just looked tired and miserable, and she was mad all the time. And her mom was like, you probably need to go to the doctor.
Yeah, and Dr. Klenner is married to her mom's sister, right?
Yes. So Dr. Klenner is her uncle by marriage. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Fritz is her first cousin. When she went in that day, her first cousin Fritz was actually working, and he was the one who examined her.
Oh, I did not read that part.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
In fact, he was the one who diagnosed her, but his father had, I guess, confirmed the diagnosis.
Wow.
Yes. That tells you how involved he was in the clinic.
Yeah, way more than he
needed to be.
Definitely.
So, yeah, that was the first time she had seen him, though, in years, because they didn't really grow up super close, but they were blood first cousins. Like everyone else, Susie believed he was a medical student at Duke and that he was authorized, of course, to practice medicine. After all, he was seeing all the patients in the doctor's office in Reidsville.
That is insane.
Yeah. So anyway, with her diagnosis of MS, he prescribed Susie with 3 guesses.
Vitamin C.
Yes.
Vitamin A, B, and C.
Yep. Lots of vitamins, but especially that vitamin C. Apparently, she was really grateful for his help because Susie and Fritz started spending lots of time together. She was still living with her parents at home, and they just, I don't know, they didn't love the way that looked. Even though, like, they didn't want to believe anything was going on at first, they were first cousins, and I don't know.
It was kind of a little bit over what would be a normal.
Yeah.
And they were questioning, like, that. What's
like,
going
what are you
on
doing?
here?
Yeah. And so eventually they did just flat out ask her, like, is something going on between you two? And she was furious, of course, and swore that there was nothing. And, you guys just hate me. I could just hear her tantrum. It became more and more obvious, though, that they were having a sexual affair. In fact, her parents would catch him leaving early in the mornings. And yeah, it was just...
And that was part of what she and her mother argued about the most.
Yes, was Fritz. Fritz didn't like her mother either because he had always been told that she, along with the rest of her sisters, had always rejected his father.
Mm-hmm.
So Fritz didn't really care for the Newsomes either.
Okay.
But especially the mother. But anyways, one night all of this came to a head over dinner, and Susie ended up packing up her and the boys and moving out. She got an apartment for the three of them in Greensboro, and it wasn't long before Cousin Fritz was staying there every night and just basically moved in. Susie wouldn't have anything to do with her parents anymore, nor would she allow the boys to even talk to them. They also weren't allowed to talk to their grandmother, the Dolores, because she believed that, and was true, that Dolores was helping Tom financially with their visitation lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
As much as possible, she cut communication off, but like you had said, between the boys and their dad as well. She treated the boys as if they were her property.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know so much. This is what I think. Everybody's like, she was really just obsessed with the boys and wanted them near her. I kind of agree with what Tom would later say. He thought that she just wanted to keep them away from everybody so that nobody would know what was actually going on behind closed doors with them.
Sure.
And in her crazy life.
Right, because there were times when he said he felt like on the phone they were being listened to, and they had to be really careful what they would say to him, and that they were being coached on what to say, what not to say.
Yep.
And he could tell because they would catch themselves.
Yes.
So there's definitely, she's hiding a lot.
Right.
And, you can't always control what a kid forgets and says.
Yes, exactly. And I think she used the boys to control people. And as pawns. And her refusal to allow Tom to see the boys is what triggered all of those long custody or those long visitation battles. He never even wanted full custody. Not that he didn't want it, but
he wasn't trying to take them away from their mother.
Exactly. When Jim and John finally got a court-ordered visit with their dad, Susie was enraged and blamed Dolores, her ex-mother-in-law, for helping him financially fight for visitation. Whatever hatred she had for Dolores before, that just solidified it and made it 10 times worse. But Tom was shocked to hear that the boys were calling Fritz Papa.
Yeah.
He's like, isn't that your mom's cousin?
And there was a couple of times when they were at his house that they slipped up and called him Papa.
Yes.
And he and Kathy were like, they had never called Tom Papa before, and they were wondering where that came from.
Right.
And then they found out that's what they called Fritz. So again, with kids, you can't always control what slips up out of them. And things were coming to light.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in May of 1984, Dr. Klenner would have a heart attack. He refused to go to the hospital in Reidsville because he didn't like one of the doctors there. And so he insisted on being taken to Moorhead Hospital in Eden, which was further away. And Dr. Klenner ended up dying. Fritz was heartbroken. I mean, his dad really was his best friend. He just cried and told everybody he, could about trying to desperately save his father. And friends and family knew that this wasn't going to be good for Fritz's mental health, but nobody could have guessed how bad things would get. And whatever he felt for Susie before, I think it just all intensified after that. After his death, Fritz and Susie just went all in on this shared delusion that her ex-husband, Tom, was planning to take Jim and John away from her. Tom, he wanted to see the boys more often than, 30 days a year. But like we said, he was not trying to take them away from her. During the summer of 1984, Jim and John went to their dad's in Albuquerque for their scheduled summer vacation, the 30 days. He was shocked by their appearance. John and Jim, they looked pale. They had some bruising on their little bodies. They were disheveled as though they just hadn't been taken care of properly. Their hair hadn't been cut. It was dirty, and their nails hadn't been cut. It was concerning.
Mm-hmm.
And they were super skittish with him. Like they were just scared. They'd brought all these bags of vitamins with them that their mom told them that they had to take. And Tom was like, you don't have to take those. And the boys were like, we do. Like, we'll get in trouble. And so Tom told the boys, while you're here, you don't have to take them. And I promise your mom is not going to find out. And so they were really relieved and did not take them while they were there. But at first, the boys were really standoffish. Susie had obviously badmouthed him, and they were probably just afraid to have fun with him because, what if their mom found out?
Yeah, and who knows what all she had threatened them with.
Exactly. But it didn't really take them too long to warm up to their dad and his new wife, Kathy. She was really good with them as well. They had such a good visit. Tom and Kathy spoiled the boys. They took them camping. They took them to play baseball and to fish. They just spent good quality family time with the boys. And eventually they broke down and cried and begged their dad to let them stay.
Yeah.
That had to break his heart.
Yeah, I read that. It was so sad to read that.
Yes. And it did break his heart. He told him, he was like, if I could, I would for sure. So Tom asked him, he said, why don't you tell your mom that, you wanted to spend some more time with me? Or they said, are you crazy? Our mom would beat us.
Actually, I think Jim's quote was, do you want us to come back with a broken arm?
Oh.
And remember, she had broken his arm.
Yes, that is so sad.
It very much is. Ugh,
yeah. Those little boys were going through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Tom and Kathy had planned a trip to take the boys to see Dolores, their grandmother, before dropping the boys back off at home. But on July 24th, just 3 days before their planned trip to Kentucky, Tom got a call that his mother, Dolores, and his sister, Janie, had been brutally murdered. Dolores had been shot just outside her house. Half of her head had been blown off, and because of the heat, the rest of her face had turned black, and maggots had already started feeding on her body.
Oh, goodness. I did not read that part.
Mm-hmm. And poor Janie was found inside with blood all over the house from where she had tried to outrun the killer, but she had been shot just when she ran in the house. And so, as she ran, her blood just poured out all over. And she was finally found face down in a pool of her own blood. Cops believed that this was an organized hit, and they didn't really hide that from him. They told him this does not look like the work of a common robber. Tom, of course, is shocked and devastated by the news. I mean, he's just lost his whole family pretty much. So he called Susie and told her what had happened and asked to please let the boys stay a little bit longer so that they could grieve together. And she said, no, want them back. She didn't even tell him that she was sorry about the loss of his family.
Heartless.
Heartless, yes. Like I mentioned, Tom had plans to fly to Louisville with his wife and the boys on July 27th to visit the grandmother and Janie. Instead, he had to fly in a day early for their funerals. The night before he flew to Kentucky, though, Tom spent hours on the phone with his lawyer, making sure that in the event something were to happen to him, Susie would not get a penny of the money that had been left to him by his mother.
Smart man.
It was. He had it set up so that the boys would get it in a trust when they came of age.
Good. I don't think originally, he didn't want to believe those bad things about Susie.
No.
His lawyer said, he was just a quiet, kind man, and he didn't really want to fight in court.
Right.
Until he just had to. He was pushed to it with Susie.
Yes.
But at first, he didn't believe the allegations that she had abused the kids, and he didn't believe that she was trying to keep them from him. But then it became... He realized it was obvious.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess he had woken up by that point and realized there was more going on, and he took care of that.
Yeah, he did.
I'm glad.
He did. Well, detectives, they met Tom at the airport when he landed, because the thing is that Tom was really the only person who stood to gain everything from his mother and sister's murders, from their deaths. He was set to inherit a literal fortune.
Yeah. So that does look a little sus.
Of course. Especially with both of them dead. Of course, he was an immediate suspect, and he understood that.
Yeah.
He was cooperative from the start. He answered all of their questions and agreed to a lie detector test. The FBI thoroughly checked him out. They even followed him after he went back home to Albuquerque after the funerals, but Tom wasn't their guy. He had no criminal background. He had no big financial issues. And he had a good relationship at that point. After Susie, he had a great relationship with his mom and sister. He passed a lie detector test, and they finally cleared him as a suspect.
Did he tell them he suspected anybody, or did he just
I don't
have no
think
clue?
he did in the beginning.
He didn't have a clue.
No, I don't think he did in the beginning. Tom actually ended up putting out first it was a $10,000 reward, but then he put out a $15,000 reward for any information that would lead to the arrest of his mother and sister's killer or killers. Meanwhile, he decided that he was going to take the money that he inherited if it took every last cent, and he was going to fight for more visitation with his boys. Susie's mother, Tom's former mother-in-law, she wrote Tom a letter telling him how sorry she was for his loss. And Tom took this opportunity. He said he knew that there was a lot of history between the two of them, but he went out on a limb and wrote this letter to her, quote, "I believe that in order for children of divorce to come out of the experience as well as possible, it is vital for them to have a strong relationship with their father as well as their mother." And then Florence Newsome wrote back, and she said, "I agree. It is very important that the boys have a strong and good relationship with their father. We hope you and Susie can have good communication so the boys will not play one parent against the other." Tom and Kathy just slowly through that interaction started communicating more and more with the Newsomes. And they were worried too. They didn't want to throw their daughter under a bus, but they had their concerns about her and the boys and their situation with Susie and Fritz. She was becoming more and more secretive and possessive, paranoid. And for God's sake, she's sleeping with her first cousin who had convinced her that he's part of the CIA and that her ex-husband has ties to the mafia. Susie, she was so strict with the boys. They weren't allowed to play with friends. They weren't allowed to play sports. They weren't allowed to really see any family outside of Susie and Fritz. Eventually, Robert Newsome, Susie's dad, decided that he was going to testify for Tom in an upcoming visitation hearing to try to help him get regular visitation with the boys. When Susie found this out, she was livid. This made her parents her enemies. And Fritz was Susie's protector. And if you were her enemy, then you were his enemy as well. And remember, he never liked them that much anyway, because of the way he felt like they had behaved towards his father. Susie told her brother and everyone that would listen that Tom had associations with the mob and that that's why his mother and sister had been killed. She even told some people that he'd been the one that had ordered the hit. She said she knew it because Fritz was a CIA agent and had secret government intel. Fritz, he'd worked hard to convince someone else, too, that he was a CIA agent. This was a family friend, a 21-year-old boy named Ian Perkins, who was from an upstanding family in Reidsville. He was, at that point, a student at Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia. Perkins had known Fritz really his whole life, and he had always looked up to him. Have you ever hung out with somebody when you're really young, a teenager, and you're like, they are so cool. And then you get older and you're like, they are weird as crap.
Yeah.
That was probably the situation here.
I am sure.
Because Fritz was a lot older than him. And he just thought Fritz was the coolest guy ever.
He probably seemed different. And,
yeah.
When you're that young, you buy those lies.
Exactly.
And then when you realize they're lies, you look back and think, that was so stupid. Why did I believe that?
Exactly. Yes. They both hated communism. And Ian, he was just a true patriot. He loved America. And Fritz had filled Ian's head with, these conspiracies and stories about his undercover government work, telling him how many times he'd come so close to being killed before he saved the day.
Again, being the hero in those stories.
Always. And it all seemed so exciting to this 21-year-old boy. Perkins actually had dreams someday of becoming a CIA agent himself. It's just like somebody who wanted to be in the military or wanted to be a Green Beret or he wanted to be an agent. He just thought that was the coolest thing. In the spring of 1985, Fritz came to Ian with something really big. He needed someone that he could trust. Fritz was going to be in an undercover drug operation and had been ordered to kill 3 smugglers from Texas. Well, actually, it was just 1 smuggler, but he was with 2 other people. And so he was going to have to kill 3 people. And they were actually going to be, they were from Texas, but they were going to be making a drop in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Fritz told Ian this was going to be an opportunity of a lifetime for him to prove himself and to be a part of this, covert foreign drug trafficking mission. He explained that the job would be a test and that if he did a good job, he would be asked to participate in other missions that would eventually lead to a job for him. And he was going to be paid $500. So, hey. Fritz told Ian that he had convinced his higher ups to give him a chance. And this meant a lot to Ian. I mean, it was a dream come true. The date of the mission was the weekend of May 17th, the 17th through the 19th. It was going to be a quick trip that was going to look like they were going camping in the mountains. Ian didn't even have to get out of the car for the actual killings. All he had to do was drive Fritz to a neighborhood in Winston-Salem just after midnight. When the job was done, Ian would pick Fritz back up, and when he got back in the vehicle, he told Ian that he had to knife 2 security guards before he was able to get to the drug dealer to shoot him. They stopped in Mount Airy so that Fritz could get out and stretch. He changed his clothes and took out a big knife to cut up the shirt that he'd been wearing and the shoes that he'd been wearing and the hat. And then he threw all of those things in the dumpster. Fritz took over and he drove after that. And then they went to a rest stop on I-77 and went to the restroom where Fritz would shave his beard that he'd been growing out for like 3 years. They went back to a campground where Fritz removed the barrel from his .45 and threw it into the lake. They drove about a quarter mile on the Blue Ridge Parkway before Fritz walked into the woods and buried these 2 big knives. When they got back, Fritz went to the bathroom and started throwing up. And then Ian threw up as well. 3 people were murdered that night, but it was not drug traffickers. Ian ended up a couple of days later when he found out how Bob and Florence Newsom had been murdered in Winston-Salem on the same weekend as Fritz's drug operation. He was like, this is just the craziest coincidence. But he thought that the Newsoms had been murdered on Sunday because that's what Fritz had told him. Oh. And the drug killings had taken place on Saturday. He really did think it was just a coincidence. Susie called the detectives and in a panic, and she told him she was terrified that she and Fritz and the boys were in danger because of Tom's mob ties. She told them that she thought they were going to be killed so that Tom could get her inheritance. The 2 detectives were kind of starting to put 2 and 2 together at this point. They realized like something is going on here.
Yeah. And it had to sound unhinged.
Yeah, especially when they found out from I'm so sorry, but what's Susie's brother's name?
Rob.
Especially when they found out from Rob that his sister's ex-in-laws had been killed. Mm-hmm. And now her parents and grandmother had been killed.
Right. Because if you remember at the end of part 1, that was the very last thing that we had talked about when they asked Rob who would want to do this. And he said, well, I don't know, but last summer, my sister's ex-mother and sister-in-law were killed. And so things are starting to unravel a little bit there. They're starting to see some links.
Yes. Yeah. And at that point, he was convinced that it was Fritz.
While that may be true, Susie and Rob's first cousin on their dad's side, her name was Nancy. Uh-huh. When she found out about the murders of her aunt and uncle and her grandmother, the first words Nancy just started screaming was, Susie did this. I know she did.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
The two detectives ended up going to the rooming house a few blocks from the campus where Ian was staying. And they just, started asking questions. And Ian gave them the story to begin with that Fritz had told him to give, that they had just gone on a camping trip. Finally, though, after a few hours and, them finally asking him, do you want to go to prison for the rest of your life for accessory to murder? He broke down at that point and he started crying and he was like, yes, we did go to Winston-Salem and I went with Fritz, but we'd been on a CIA mission. We weren't on a murder mission.
Can you imagine right then what he was thinking? Because I'm sure he's thinking, I don't want to tell them because I'm on the CIA mission.
Yes.
I can't tell. And yet they're putting this fear in him and he's probably now realizing, oh my gosh, what was I a part of? And he's probably trying to reconcile those two things.
I think so.
Can you imagine how freaked out he felt?
Oh, I know. They weren't even sure if they could believe that or not. It was so far-fetched.
Yeah.
They listened to his outrageous story, but they realized that when Ian finally realized that he had been lied to, he was actually devastated.
Oh, poor kid.
And furious. I mean, he just could not believe what had happened. He told the investigators that he would do anything he could do to help them. He took him to the mountain where Fritz had thrown away, some of those items, but they weren't able to find anything at that point. So then the investigators asked Ian if he would wear a wire to tape some of Fritz's conversations with him. And he agreed to do that. And it was thanks to Ian's cooperation that they were actually able to build a case against Fritz. On June 3rd in 1985, officers from several different law enforcement agencies went to Susie's apartment off of Friendly Avenue.
Yes, officers from Louisville, Kentucky, and Forsyth County, and the SBI office in Greensboro were moving in on Fritz, ready to arrest him in the slayings of the Lynch family and the Newsome murders in Winston-Salem. Fritz had been under surveillance, and the officers feared that Fritz was preparing to run. With 3 different law enforcement agencies involved, they picked up an SBI car so that the communication through the highway patrol could be relayed to all the departments. But this proved to be a big problem during the event that happened because information was being passed through second and third party, and wrong information ended up being passed and lack of information, and it really caused some big problems.
Okay.
Nearby Susie's apartment, a burgundy Camaro driven by a narcotics officer was stationed behind her building. A Chevy Impala driven by an SBI agent was stationed on the east side of the apartment. And just up the street at the Big Bear supermarket, the command car, a tan Buick Riviera, waited. It was joined by officers in a 4-door Ford and a Mustang. Ominously overhead, an SBI airplane circled. The officers witnessed Fritz leave the apartment and go to Radio Shack. After he left that store, as he headed back to the apartment, he would turn down side roads and then double back, and he just would never take a direct route on the way.
Did he know he was being followed?
They wondered if he realized that they were surveilling him.
Okay.
Because then he pulled into a parking lot and he sat there for about 16 minutes. But the windows were tinted and they couldn't tell what he was doing. And so they wondered, did he buy a police scanner at the Radio Shack and is he sitting there installing it? But they really didn't know.
Okay.
They're just wondering, does he know or does he not know?
Right.
They rightfully assumed he would be heavily armed, and they did not want to risk a standoff at the apartment complex there at Friendly Hills. So they called the apartment, and they asked for Fritz. But Susie said, well, he's not here, although he was there at that time. Mm-hmm. So before they could come up with a plan B, they observed Susie and Fritz beginning to move things back and forth from the apartment to her black Chevy Blazer. The Blazer was well equipped with roll bars, a 7-row headlight that could throw a 180-degree arc of light, enough to blind somebody, a heavy steel front bumper with a winch, and black tinted windows. They witnessed Fritz carrying what appeared to be 3 large assault weapons to the Blazer. And Susie was carrying duffel bags, and her 2 black chows came along. But then what stopped officers in their tracks was when Susie and Fritz came out of the apartment with Jim and John. They had assumed the boys were at school that day, but they had not. And this changed the game dramatically.
Yeah.
The Blazer pulled out of the apartment and headed down Hunt Club Road toward the apartment entrance on West Friendly Avenue. Now, Darlene and I took a little road trip a couple of weeks ago, and we actually went to the apartment complex, and then we traveled the route of this whole chase that goes down. We went the whole distance, and wasn't it just so weird?
It was. It was eerie because it would have been a slow chase for one thing.
Yes.
And it would have lasted for
probably about an hour.
Yeah.
As we were taking pictures of some of these things, and we'll post those in our Facebook group. As Fritz pulled the Blazer out of the complex, the officer in charge, Ed Hunt, in the command car, pulled in front of him at an angle, essentially like blocking him off, and he starts waving his badge. Fritz looked a little bit surprised, but he was not deterred. He simply pulled the Blazer up and over the curb and went around the officers and pulled out onto Friendly Avenue heading east. Officers frantically radioed for backup to stop that car. Officers heading west could see the Blazer coming straight toward them, and so they attempted to stop it at the next intersection. 2 other patrol cars were now following the Blazer, one being that Chevy Camaro. The Camaro pulled directly in front of Fritz's Blazer. Fritz just pulled into the left lane and went around it and continued going. The Mustang pulled out to overtake Fritz, causing Officer Dennis in the first car to go into a skid, heading straight for the Blazer. And when he did, he saw Fritz holding an Uzi pointing it straight at him.
Oh, my gosh.
As he quickly tried to move in an effort to protect his head, draw his gun, everything's happening at once, he saw the flash fire from the gun. 5 bullets hit his car. 2 hit him. One passing through a notepad in his shirt pocket and hitting him in the upper chest. The other bullet hit the buckle of his utility belt and deflected into the leather.
That's crazy.
But he felt as if he had been hit by a sledgehammer. Now, the officers were wearing bulletproof vests.
Okay.
Thank God for that.
Yes.
Dennis called for help, and then chaos ensued with officers skidding in the intersection, innocent civilians caught in the middle, as Fritz turned the Uzi on the pursuing Mustang.
Oh, my God.
Bullets were spraying everywhere. It was just craziness. Officer Nobles was trying to take cover in the backseat of his car and reaching for his gun as one of the bullets struck his 9mm, split it in 2, and both pieces of it hit him in his right armpit. Gunfire was now being exchanged between several officers and Fritz, all within that busy intersection. It was unbelievably terrifying. A woman pumping gas at a nearby gas station had to crouch for cover after a bullet hit her windshield. Employees at the Wachovia Bank heard the shots and rushed to the door to see a man standing in the road with a gun. They rushed back inside for cover. A woman mowing on the Guilford College campus dived off of her mower. Just pure chaos. Fritz was pretty much boxed in at that point on all sides by officers. And yet, once again, he managed to get back in the Blazer and maneuver around several cars and leave the scene.
Crazy.
And so now he was headed up New Garden Road, and officers scrambled to pursue him once again. Fritz was fleeing, but he wasn't speeding. He was just doing 35 miles an hour. And suddenly, just beyond the intersection of New Garden and Fleming Road, he once again swung the Blazer across both lanes, stopped, got out with his guns, and waited for the oncoming officers. As soon as he saw them approaching, he opened fire. And then officers once again stopped and had to scurry to avoid being hit. And they began to return fire. Fritz got back in the Blazer and slowly left the scene again. And now officers decided to follow from a safer distance. Everything was just kind of in disarray. They weren't all on the same page because they were trying to get that radio communication, and it just wasn't working very well.
And I'm sure nobody was expecting all this.
Right. Absolutely not. Obviously, now they're calling more units in. They're calling Greensboro police officers. They're calling Guilford County to come, and they're responding. All these cars are coming from different directions to descend on Fritz, Susie, and the boys. Fritz had now turned onto 220 North. As he passed by the Food Lion on the right and made a right turn onto 150, and that was kind of heading into Summerfield, he saw an officer waiting for him in the lot. Fritz smiled at Officer Thacker as he passed him.
Gosh.
Officer Thacker pulled behind him and turned on his lights and siren. More officers followed. There's a caravan following him now. The Highway Patrol was preparing a roadblock on 150 a little further up for him. Fritz fired at the officers who were following him, even now as he continued driving. At one point, I guess because he's driving and shooting at the same time, he swerved into the left lane into the path of an oncoming Volkswagen, and that VW had to swerve to avoid a collision. Suddenly, the Blazer slows down to about 10 miles per hour. Thacker thought he heard a clack-clack sound come from the Blazer, and suddenly he saw the Blazer's brake lights come on just before Strader Road. Officers were preparing for Fritz to get out and start firing at him again because he had already done that a couple of times. But before Thacker could get out and prepare for that, he saw a stream of fire shoot out from underneath the Blazer and then heard an ear-splitting boom. The Blazer catapulted into the air as high as the telephone wires and then slammed back to the pavement and into a ditch. It was 3:07 p.m. He just blew the whole thing up, one officer called in. Get an ambulance out here now. Officers found Fritz about 100 feet beyond the Blazer. Amazingly, he was actually still breathing when they got to him. He had a small pistol in his pocket, a knife on his belt, a religious medallion around his neck, and in his right pocket was rosary beads and a cross on a gold chain.
Wow.
They hoped maybe he would give like a last-minute confession, but no such luck. They turned him on his back where his breath was labored, and he began to gurgle, and then his breathing stopped. Fritz had drowned in his own blood. Susie lay on the other side of a driveway culvert, parts of her seat embedded in her, because she had been sitting on the seat. The bomb had been under her seat. She was bleeding from her nose, ears, and mouth. Her right leg had been blown off at the knee, her left leg at the shin. Her lower body was mangled. The remains of the Blazer lay in a ditch beside a horse pasture. Bits and pieces all over the road everywhere. The passenger door was lodged 50 feet up in a pine tree. Guns and ammo littered the highway. The Uzi, a 9mm pistol, 2 lightweight shotguns, a .45, other pistols, and a flare gun. And along with that, there were gas masks, tarps, sea rations, knives, machetes, brass knuckles, handcuffs.
My gosh.
Choke wires, on and on. And then, among all the wreckage, lay the bodies of 2 little boys, ages 9 and 10, with one of their chows in the middle of them. It was a somber moment for everyone. More contents of the Blazer were a syllabus from Susie's college class. She had called one of her professors just hours before this chase and asked about retaking a test later that day. And that I found that to be strange.
That is,
like
yeah,
she
that's
didn't
weird.
think it was going to end like this.
Yeah.
And then what I found to be so tragic and ironic was they also found a children's book in the back with the boys called No Monsters in the Closet.
Oh, that is so sad.
Isn't it? Within minutes of the blast, the sky had suddenly turned dark gray with smoke from the explosion, and then with storm clouds. The storm descended fast and furiously. High winds and a lightning strike 200 yards away, and then torrential rains forced officers to take cover in their cars. Marble-sized hail beat down on the road and the bodies. Officer Davidson remarked, "It was like the Lord was mad, like he was real mad."
When investigators went back to Susie's apartment to investigate, what had happened and to see what they could find there were actually 3 separate handwritten notes. This is to certify that my friend Ian Perkins was in no way involved in any wrongdoings of any kind. He was with me on a camping trip to Peaks of Otter on the weekend of May 18th, and to the best of his certain knowledge and training for a possible career in the covert operations, Fred R. Klenner Jr. The next note said, the firearms in this apartment and in the Blazer were the property of Fred R. Klenner Sr., which was his father, and are the property of Annie Sharp Klenner, as are the computer, TV, electronics equipment, weight machines, and camping gear. Fred R. Klenner Jr. The last note said, I have in my life never physically harmed anyone as in taking human life. I am innocent of any accusations that have come to my attention and fear an elaborate frame. I have spent my life in the service of my God, my country, and my family. Fred R. Klenner Jr. Mother, I love you now and always. Your Fritz.
What do you make of that?
I mean, he's a liar. He's a pathological liar.
Yeah.
That's what I make of it. I have a hard time understanding like what their end game was. Like, what were they planning? I just wish I knew. I mean, certainly they had something planned or they wouldn't have had their car filled with all that stuff, I wouldn't think.
I don't know. Like, they were moving all that stuff to the car.
Mm-hmm.
Did she think they were going to get away? Like, were they just going to try to get away and hide up at the mountain? Did she? I don't know.
I think they knew there was a possibility that they weren't going to get away, but I think maybe they hoped for better. Mm-hmm. But I do think that they probably had a pact.
Yeah. And this was their last ditch effort to get away. But if they didn't get away, then they were going to do this. And
yeah.
So what happened a little bit after that, you're going to share some of the things at the end.
Yes.
But autopsies on the boys did later show that Jim and John had been given cyanide before the bomb blast in the car. They were not dead. They were unconscious, but their bodies were still breathing when they were shot in the head due to the fact that the son that was it John, who was behind Susie in the back seat, shot at very close range. And Jim, who was behind Fritz's seat, was shot at about 2 to 3 feet away. They have determined that they believed Susie was the one who shot the boys before the blast.
Which is just incomprehensible. It's so hard to understand.
Yeah, really. I mean, I can't fathom it.
No. After Ian Perkins helped the sheriff's department record those conversations with Fritz, he ended up still having to serve some time. I mean, he had, unknowingly or not, he had committed a crime. And so he ended up serving 4 months in prison for accessory after the fact. And he had to pay a small fine. The judges were very lenient with him because he had actually risked his life and going to record those conversations with Fritz. In fact, on one of the times that he met with him over a period of 3 different days. And on one of those occasions, Fritz gave him a pill for his nerves. And the cops were like, oh my, I mean, they couldn't say anything, but they were thinking, don't take that pill, don't take it. And he did.
Oh, wow.
I mean, thankfully he was okay, but you know, he really did risk his life because he could have very easily, I mean, he was taking folks out.
I bet those cops were beside themselves.
They were.
Knowing they had put him in that kind of danger too.
Yes, yes. And they really believed that he was truly ignorant of Fritz's intentions. I mean, even Fritz said that himself in the end. Ian Perkins ended up getting married and having 2 children. He graduated from UNC in Greensboro and served in the National Guard. He later said that he cannot imagine how hard all that must have been for his parents and sister, or how he would have handled the situation if it had been his boys that found themselves in this position. He said that he shuddered to think of it, and later said that it just wasn't an easy thing to live with the fact that he actually had helped kill 3 people. But he said that God had given him a chance and that he had done his best to be worthy of that second chance. Tom Lynch later said that for years, all he could think about was his boys and how everyone had let them down.
Yeah.
He said anger consumed him for a long time, and that those bitter feelings could easily return when he remembered everything that he lost between the years of 1984, losing his mother and sister, and then in 1985, losing his boys. He said that his sons should never have been killed. He actually retired from dentistry and ended up being married a third time. So him and his second wife, Kathleen, did not work out. But he married again and had a daughter named Ari, who he said had changed his entire life for the better. But he said that Jim and John were never far from his mind. Tom said that most of his friends and acquaintances his age, they were having grandchildren by this age. And he said, I'm never going to have that. And his heart was just broken. And so I can see how that second marriage might not have worked out with all the trauma that he was going through. And for years, he was actually fighting, I guess, to prove that Susie he didn't want her to get off scot-free with everybody thinking she was an innocent victim. He didn't want everybody thinking that she was, a victim of Fritz's. And so it was actually really because of him that they found out that the boys were shot, probably by her, because of his just persistence and all of that. Or it probably would have been swept under the rug and looked like poor Susie and her boys.
Yeah, because I do think there were some in her family who felt very strongly that it was all Fritz.
Yes.
And that he had Susie convinced that Tom was in the CIA and, in the mafia, and that she really believed all of that.
Right.
But then others say, no, she was just as much at fault. And you and I were discussing before recording today about that.
Yeah.
And you pointed out the importance of that there was a court case later in which the inheritance came into question between Tom Lynch and Susie's brother, Rob Newsom. Because ultimately, if Susie died first before the boys, then essentially her inheritance from her parents would pass to them.
Yes.
And then essentially that would pass to Tom.
Right.
But if she had anything to do with the killings, and if she killed the boys first, then she's not going to inherit from her parents anyway.
Right.
I guess that might be a legal matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it wouldn't go to
the boys. It would go to her brother.
It would go to her brother.
Everything would go to her brother. Everything from her inheritance would go to her brother, Rob. And so there was a case about that. And Tom really pushed it.
Yes.
And you and I talked off the mics about, whether that was a good thing to do or not. And I was feeling like, well, it really should have gone to Rob because that was his parents' money and their assets. And I was wondering, is that greedy of Tom? But then you had some good points about that, which were...
Tom has lost a lot. I don't know. I just don't feel like it was wrong. And two, he would have only had access to Susie's inheritance. Her brother still would have had his own inheritance. So basically, he would be getting his son's inheritance. If one of them outlived Susie, which could never be really proven one way or another, I think his lawyers were trying to prove that one of the boys had outlasted her, but it could never really be proven. But ultimately, they were able to come to a settlement, which they never disclosed the amount. They settled it outside of court pretty much.
Yeah, and it took like 6 years. It was 1991 before it was settled. But you did make some good points about Tom. And even though he inherited all of Janie's and his mother's, so he already had inherited quite a bit.
Yes.
But he did lose his sons. And it's not that money is going to replace his sons. But I'm sure, as you said to me earlier, that he had to feel like at least some kind of justice.
Yeah, he lost all his entire family.
Yeah.
He lost his mother. He lost his sister. He lost both of his sons to who he probably feels like is a monster.
Yeah.
He probably wanted her money. He was going after her money, not her brother's money.
Right.
I really think that was probably the right thing.
Yeah. That actually concludes this crazy tale. And believe me when I say we didn't really, there are so many details that we left out.
So many more, yes.
But, man.
Yeah, those sure were some hard times.
They sure were.
While the effects of massive doses of vitamin C may still be in question, one thing is a proven fact. I listen to Hard Times and True Crimes, and I have never had polio or MS. So make sure you tell everybody you know, and a few people you don't, to check us out for their own health and safety. Till next time, goodbye.